So today I am very excited to welcome our guest speaker, Nick Doelman, who's a senior content developer at Microsoft, previous MVP, uh, current powerlifter across the globe, and he'll be doing an introduction to Power Pages. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm super stoked to learn a little bit more about what's become of Power Apps and Power Apps portals. So super excited to have him on presenting to us and demoing today. I would love to invite Nick onto the screen to take over the reins with one last shout out to Ludia, Lexicon, and of course, SkyPoint Cloud. So thank you guys all for being here. Nick, the screen is yours.
Today we're going to be talking about Power Pages. Thanks, Tina, for the introduction, and let's just dive right into it. So a little bit about who I am. My name's Nick Doelman. I am currently a senior content developer at Microsoft. I was an MVP from 2017 to 2021. I know you're all talking about Dynamics 365. So I've been working with Dynamics CRM since version 1 way back in 2003 and all through the iterations into Dynamics 365 and of course into the Power Platform. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. And as Tina alluded to, I'm also a competitive powerlifter. I'm on the Canadian national team. I'm going to compete in the World Bench Press Championship in South Africa at the end of May. So I'm into training for that right now. Just last week I was at the Canadian Nationals in Vancouver. I did okay. That's a whole other discussion on how some of the things went. Here's different ways to get a hold of me. There's my LinkedIn. And if you do reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's great. Definitely send me a little note to say that you saw my presentation on the Portland user group, Power Platform user group. So I do get a lot of requests. So sometimes it's kind of nice to know where folks are coming in from. I do have my own personal blog. It's been kind of quiet last year because when I joined Microsoft, I was kind of shifting focus, but I am hoping to kind of get back into a regular rhythm again. I do have a couple posts that I put out the last couple weeks. Um, of course, my day job is I work on the learn content or the documentation for Microsoft Power Pages. So of course, check out learn.microsoft.com/Power Pages for all the updates, all the cool stuff that's coming, and the documentation of the product that I'm going to show you this evening. And then I also have my GitHub. So what I'll probably do is I'll upload this slide deck up into GitHub a little bit later on. So you'll be able to download that if you wanted to have a copy of that. So moving along. So like I said, I am a full-time employee of Microsoft, but a lot of my ideas and views and options, opinions, they're based a lot on my field experience. So like I said, I have about 30 years experience prior to joining Microsoft. So this is a bit of a disclaimer. So this is where some of these presentations come from. The real translation is don't get me into trouble. So if I say something and it comes up the chain and back down the chain, well, someone from Microsoft said we could do this. Usually it's these questions around licensing. So definitely don't get me into trouble, but I will try to get you the best information I possibly can. All right, so enough about me. The reason why we're all here is to learn more about Power Pages. So here is the agenda that I'm going to be following this evening. We're going to talk a little bit of what are Power Pages, what it's all about. And then we're going to build like a simple portal app or a simple website. We're going to learn how that's provisioned. We're going to take a look at the tools that you would use to build out that site. We're going to do things like design and style a very simple web page, but then we're going to dive into what Power Pages is really good at, being able to interact with Dataverse data. So adding a page to be able to show data and transact with that. We'll talk a little bit about security, about only allowing users to view and edit their own data. And of course, I hope to have some time at the end we can answer some questions and hopefully at least give you the information you need, and if not, point you in the right direction. So the first question is, what are Power Pages? So really, at the end of the day, it is part of the Power Platform. It is one of the 5 pillars, along with Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents. And did I forget one? Anyways, it's now one of those products. It is Power Apps Portals. So if you've heard about what Power Apps Portals, what it was before was really a feature of Power Apps, but really it's the same thing, a lot of the same structure. So if you've had any experience with Power Apps Portals, It's all very easily transferable to Power Pages. But what it is a platform to build websites, web applications, and also to a certain extent, mobile applications as well. So what does Power Pages brings beyond Power Apps portals? We have a new design studio. We have new workspaces. We have a series of new templates, and they keep releasing new templates every few weeks now. And I know that there's more templates coming to help you build out the sites that you want to build. But really where it's its true power, like I mentioned earlier, it allows external stakeholders to interact, be able to create, to read, to update, even delete information that you're storing in Microsoft Dataverse. So it exposes Dataverse in a secure way to those external stakeholders. Now, what this could be is Power Pages can be a component as part of an overall business application, meaning if you already have Dataverse, you already have model-driven apps, managing a lot of that in administration stuff. You already have your staff using Canvas apps. You're already using Power BI to do analytics. Power Pages can extend that even further by providing you a website interface to your external stakeholders to that information. Or you could actually just build on its own a Power Pages site. When you get the licensing, it does provide you a certain allocation to Dataverse as well. So you can actually build your end-to-end solution 100% within Power Pages. Like many things, it really just depends on what your business needs or what your business requirements are. I'm a big fan of using it to extend already existing systems, but we do have situations where people will build sites completely standalone and work with that. And there's just a few examples of other sites that have been built. Of course, during the pandemic, a lot of these vaccination sites or testing sites had to be ramped up very quickly. So Power Pages was a very big component in making that happen. So again, I wanted to reiterate this. I even had its own special slide. Power Pages is Power Apps portals. It's the exact same thing. It's I work for Microsoft, so as you know, we at Microsoft love to sometimes rename things just to keep life interesting. But really, it's a lot of that same technology. But of course, there's a lot of investment and a lot of future, great roadmap of features and expanding on this product. So another thing I really want to reiterate as well is Power Pages runs on Dataverse. So a lot of times I might get questions saying, hey, I want to build a Power Pages site, but I want to tie that back into a SQL Server database or some other database. Well, it's not that you can't do it, but effectively you'll have to go through Dataverse to get there. So you could set up things like virtual tables and things like that, but ultimately at the end of the day, this is a Dataverse solution. So all the site metadata, so everything that describes the web pages, the links and things of that sort, they're actually stored in Dataverse. A lot of those features and that business data that you'll be accessing is in Dataverse. A lot of the forms and views that you'll use on building out these pages, and we'll touch on that in the demo, are actually using model-driven app forms and views as the foundation. And the big thing is when we talk about authenticated users logging into the system, they are stored as Dataverse contacts. So if you're using even Dynamics 365, you can use actually Power Pages and extend your Dynamics 365 apps, your customers being stored as contacts. Well, those will equal those user accounts used to access Power Pages. And with this, it can be extended to other sites with other Dataverse capabilities. You could do like plugins. You could actually integrate this with SharePoint, and you can also surface Power BI dashboards and reports directly within Power Pages as well, including Power Virtual Agents and some other things. So a lot of extensibility there. So I will get into the demo and we'll be using a lot of these tools, but I really wanted to talk about the different tools that you use to build Power Pages with. First one is what's called the Design Studio. Now, this is new. This is something that when Microsoft rebranded Power Apps portals into Power Pages, they came out with this new design studio, and it's really there was a design studio in Power Apps portals. This is the new and improved and enhanced version, and we'll be using that pretty much exclusively this evening in the demo to build out our site. It's divided into 4 different workspaces. We have the Pages workspace where we'll create web pages. We have the data workspace where we can create our Dataverse assets like tables and forms and views. We have a styling workspace where you can go in and update your own brand kit and make your site look like your brand and follow those brand colors. And then there's also the setup workspace, which is really geared to administrators. We can set up some security things there. We can set up other things to roll out and go make your site go live. Now, there's another tool that we'll talk about a little bit, and that's what's called the Portals Management app. And if you've worked with Power Apps portals in the past, chances are you've encountered the Portals Management app. This is really, at the end of the day, just a model-driven Power App. But what it allows us to do is update that portal metadata. So we can go in here, we could build a site 100% within the Portals Management app. We could use that to update our web pages, our forms, our lists, and some of the other components. Um, it's very clunky to do it that way. I know a lot of people, myself included, over the years, this is the main tool we used. But that's the nice thing about these new design studios coming out is we don't need to utilize tools like this. Now, this still is very important because there's a lot of those more advanced features, those certain tweaks that we'll need to go into the portal management app for. I will touch on that a little bit this evening as well, but just sort of keep track of, some of the other tools we use to configure Power Pages. Now, I'm not going to dive in too much on tonight. Unfortunately, I know if there are some developers in the crowd, you're probably going to be a little bit sad, but that's okay. Maybe I can come back some other day and do a developer session on Power Pages. But we also have the ability to use things like Visual Studio Code and something called the Power Platform command line interface. So those of you who are developers or administrators, you might have already run into the Power Platform CLI. This provides you that pro developer experience. You could update the portal code, the HTML, the CSS, Liquid, which is a markup language that Portals uses, or Power Pages. I'm going to keep calling it probably Portals for quite a few years until I, get into that mindset. It took me years to get from CRM to Dynamics 365. Um, and then from here, they have tools to migrate from dev to test to prod, etc. Like I said, not covering that in today's section, but I did want to mention this for awareness. So if you are a developer and you're looking down the road to extend your Power Pages site, we have the pro dev experiences and tools to enable you to do that. Now, I do have a link here, so you'll probably won't really write this down now, but when you get the deck, this is where I actually, with one of my other colleagues at Microsoft, we give a demo on the Power Platform CLI as it relates to Power Pages, basically moving sites and working a little bit with Visual Studio Code with that. All right, so we're going to dive into the demo. So kind of show you the real working software. What I'm going to do is, here's what our breakdown is going to be. We're going to first off, we're going to actually create a site and we're going to choose an environment and we'll walk you through that. But basically our scenario that we're going to follow is, it's interesting because I heard Tina mention that you're still using Meetup, which is great. It's a great platform. But what I'm going to do is just build a very quick high-level prototype. I'm going to rebuild the Power Platform user group site, but I'm going to use Power Pages. And I'm going to use these low-code, no-code techniques, and we're going to see how far we get with this evening. All right, so I'm going to get out of PowerPoint, and I'm going to I'm going to go into Power Pages, and I'm just going to increase the size of my screen a little bit, just so everybody. I'm probably going to adjust it over the course of the demo as well. But basically, first place we're going to go is, if you want, it's called Power Pages. Power Pages. It's make dot power pages dot Microsoft dot com. So if you don't want to remember that, that's fine. You don't need to. We do have an AKA thing. So you do aka.ms/MPP, make.powerapps, or make.powerpages rather, and this will take you to the Power Pages homepage. Now, I'm already logged into my tenant, but if you're not, you'll probably be prompted to log into your Power Platform tenant. And when you come here, chances are you're going to see a place that's going to say, hey, we don't, create a site kind of thing. We don't have any sites. I'm going to go here to this one rather. And I'm going to walk you through creating a site. So first thing we need to do is we need to pick our Dataverse environment. Like I said, you do need Dataverse. The other cool thing is you can set up a 30-day trial. Probably, again, don't get me in trouble, but I think we're going to extend the timeline of those trials. So it's probably going to be 90 days to do a trial. So you'll have a little bit more time to play with Power Pages and try it out for yourself. And then the other thing with these environments, I'm not sure if you're aware, is you could actually now create up to 3 developer environments. If you've not heard about this, check it out. For each user can create 3 developer environments. The developer environments, of course, aren't meant for production, but you get 2 gigs of Dataverse space. It does not count against your capacity. So that's a cool thing. And you're able to provision a Power Pages site on the developer. So really, you can actually play with this stuff with no cost whatsoever. So the first thing, obviously, want to create a site. So we just click the button. And what's going to happen here is we're going to come up with a series of templates. So here are a lot of these starter layouts and templates. We have things that are just more design specific. We have also things like scheduled meetings, an after school program, a building permit, and I know that there's a few others that are going to be coming out in the future. Now, if you're using Dynamics 365 and you have that enabled on your Dataverse environment, I do not on this particular environment, but there's also a series of the same templates that were available as part of Power Apps. Things like the partner template, the employee self-service, and another very popular one is the customer self-service template that ties into Dynamics 365 customer self-service. So all of those particular templates are available where you can create a Power Pages site. For now, I'm just going to go back to my starter layouts. I'm just going to pick one here. I'll just pick the first starter layout. What this will do, it will give your site a name, and you can give this any name that you want. It's going to create a web address, which is a little bit randomized. You can change this if you want. Now, it is .powerappsportals.com, but when you actually take a site live, if you have your own domain name, you'll need an SSL certificate. You'll be able to use your own custom domain, excuse me, your own custom domain name. So it could be, www.abccompany.com, no problem. Power Pages can handle that. So I'll basically go do this. I'm going to hit done. And now this is going to start to provision the Power Pages site. Now, currently, and this is something that we're working on, is it's going to take probably normally 45 minutes to an hour to provision that site. And the reason why that's happening, it is loading a lot of solutions to your Dataverse environment. It's also uploading a lot of what we call portal metadata, so things that describe the web pages and the links and that sort of thing. And it's also going to provision the actual website itself on Azure. So these things take a little bit of time. Currently, we're working on ways to reduce that time. And hopefully, if I come back a year from now, provisioning a Power Pages site will be a lot faster. But for now, we'll just let this run in the background. And I'm going to flip over to a different environment where I've already have a site set up. So the site is set up automatically ever since around the fall timeframe. These sites will be private, meaning in order for anyone to access this site, they'll actually still need to be a part of your tenant, and you'll actually need to give them access. So this is great for development, and as you're building out your site and you're not ready to launch it to the world, it's going to be set to private, but at any time you could flip it to be a publicly facing site. But for now, I'm going to leave it private. The site has been provisioned, and I'm going to go in and edit that site. So by going into this editor, I'm now going into what we call the design studio. And this is really the workhorse, is where we can begin to build out our site. and do different things. So I've automatically landed here on my homepage. This is a what you see is what you get interface. And as you can see, I've already begun to play with this a little bit. So I'm gonna, create, join the community, looking forward to meeting everyone. And I can begin to edit this site and change things around. I'm going to here, let's change the image. We can go do that. I'm going to change this. I'm going to go Power Platform User Group. I've already uploaded this earlier, but I could upload other images into my media library. So I'm going to do this. And we can begin to, edit the site header a little bit. So I'm just going to change that to the Portland Power Platform User Group. And of course, if you had a logo, I could find that and upload that as well and change some of the other features around this. So now I've created a brand new, I basically created the homepage here, and maybe I'll probably change a few other things. I can add a section, I can do other layouts and this type of thing. That's pretty straightforward on how to create a page. Pretty easy stuff. Now, what I might want to do is with this, what we can do is we can preview this. And I'm just going to hit preview. I'm going to hit desktop. And because, again, I've already logged into my environment, I can actually go and see this is a working site. And here it is. And from here, I can kind of navigate, see different pages and things like that. So whereas if we were building something like a Canvas app or a model-driven app, where we have actually nothing, we're starting with a blank screen. When we provision a Power Pages site, we already have a little bit of a semblance of a site set up. We have some pages, we have a bit of a menuing thing here, and then we can continue to build off of that however we want. So I'm just going to do a quick little check for questions. We can create public sites even in the developer environment. You can, but from a licensing standpoint, the developer environments are not meant for true production. So for testing and things like that, it's okay. But if you're going to actually have a proper site, you'll want to put that on a production level Dataverse. So what will happen is you're not going to be able to convert the Power Pages trial, which is that 30-day trial, soon to be a little bit longer. You won't be able to convert that to a long-term site on the developer environment. You'll be blocked by doing that. So hopefully that answers that question. Good question. Multilingual support. Absolutely. I've not turned this on, but with Power Pages, what you'll need to do in order to get multilingual, I'm in Canada, so of course every site pretty much has to be both French and English. What you'll do is you'll enable the languages on Dataverse. So you'll need to enable those languages there. Once it's enabled there, then you'll be able to go into the portal management app and enable the other languages there. And that you still need to actually translate that content into that other language. That won't be automatically done for you. I've done this. It's a little tedious is probably the best way to describe it, or a little bit clunky to, I wouldn't say clunky, tedious would be to translate a site. But hopefully our tools, this is something I've been advocating for directly within Microsoft. Every time I see a new feature, or the PM show me a new feature, I said, that's great. Well, can we do multilingual for this? How is that going to work? And that kind of messaging is getting across. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the true power is also, and I see a question about embedding a Power BI dashboard. I will definitely get to that a little bit later on, and just kind of show how that process happens. And yeah, it may be too random, but would you be able to expand something like ArcGIS storyboard into this as well? I've not done that specifically, but potentially, that could be done with some of the extensibility. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, the true power for Power Pages is Dataverse. So we do have the data workspace. I'm going to go into that. And basically what I want to do is from here, we can actually begin to create tables, forms, and views. Now, normally we would have gone into Power Apps to do this, but we can do this directly within the Design Studio and the Data Workspace. The other thing, which is a new feature, it's kind of not really all that in your face, but here as I can click on this little gear and I can pick the solution that I want to. So if I've created a solution already in Power Apps, because for ALM, we want to keep everything together in its own solution. So we're able to pick that. So I've already picked up my meetup solution. So that is the solution where all the assets that I'm going to create are going to sit in. And so that would be there. And then I can do something like simple as create a table. And I'm just going to call this session. And this is going to give me a plural name. If you've used Power Apps and created Dataverse tables before, this is using pretty much the exact same interface. So I'm just going to hit save. And what this is going to do, it's going to create that Dataverse table in my environment. It is going to create it within that solution that I specified there. And I'm just going to give this a second to build that out. So that goes fairly quickly. I just, automatically have the name column. And so maybe we want to have change that to what is, the topic of the presentation. Single line of text. This is all good. Business required. We have our advanced options. And next thing I might want to do is create another column. I'll try to make this fairly quick so you're not just staring at me, creating columns in Dataverse. I'll put a description. Again, we can pick the different data types. I'm going to choose text, but I'm going to choose multiple lines of text. And maybe I'll just increase the character count to like 20,000 just to make sure we have lots of room for our description. Going to add that here to my table. And we'll also do the presenter as well. And this will be, I'm going to make this a lookup because instead we want to look up to our contacts because our presenters could be contacts and maybe we have a requirement that we want our presenters to be able to log in and maybe edit some of this information. So I'm going to choose the contact. And again, contact is a table that's part of the common data model. So it's by default in all your Dataverse instances. And again, like I said before, contact is related to authentication. So we've got that added. So I've added a very simple table to Dataverse. Now, the next thing I'm going to want to do is with this information is we're going to build essentially model-driven views and forms, but we're going to use those for our site. So I'm going to go in first to my views tab here, and I'll just maybe modify an existing one as opposed to creating a new one. We have our sessions here. I'm going to get rid of the created on column and I'm going to click on the add column. So I'm going to add the description and add the presenter. So we have this, we can, make some adjustments here. Of course, we can do things like adding extra filters. We could save multiple different views for different things with different filtering. So I'm just going to hit save there. And again, if you've built model-driven apps before or built things in Dataverse, you probably recognize this. This is actually using the same interface. So I'm going to publish that. And we have our view here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and we're going to click on forms. So now we're going to create the forms where users can actually interact with that data. So again, I'm just going to modify the information form. And for those of you, again, who've worked with model-driven apps, you'll find this very familiar. Now, unfortunately, if you're only ever worked with Power Pages and never really worked with model-driven app forms before, this will look a little different than how it will be rendered on the portal itself. But it's fairly close. But this is sort of the tools we use because this tool originally came from an add-on from Dynamics CRM. So at the time, it was kind of a cool thing to be able to use your CRM configuration and use this on a website. Moving forward, it's kind of evolved a little bit, but we'll work with it. I'm going to make this description field, I'm going to expand it to be a few more rows. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And then let's also add our presenter here. And I can begin to format this this form, how I want it to lay out. I move the owner up here. The owner field will not be visible on portals. Got this. I'm going to save and publish this form. And again, if I was building a model-driven app, even if I went to build one later, I could reuse these forms and views for that. It's using the same tooling that you use for model-driven apps. So that's about where the similarities kind of live the same, but we're going to diverge a little bit in a minute here. So I'm just going to publish that form. And let's just go back here. So what we've done is we've created the table. This is empty. We've created some views and we've created some forms. So typically this is kind of the life cycle of if you're designing a new site. Now, the thing is, what I can do here is I can also go in and begin to add data directly into this table. So again, I don't want, don't want to spend everyone's time of me cutting and pasting data into a table. So what I have done is I've created one earlier. This is very much like a cooking show. And what I did was I've added the some of the previous meetups that you have run the last few months. So I've here about the meetup name. So some of you who've attended previous meetings probably recognize these. I put in my own. I see a few others, the description. We have the ID here, the meetup date and time. And we should also get the presenter in here as well. Now for the presenters, I didn't use the real names. I actually used sample data for this because I just didn't have the time to fill in everybody's name here. But now that I've filled in all of this data, I've done that 100% within the data workspace. So now that we've done all our data workspace chores, now let's take this and add this to a Power Pages, to our Power Pages site. So again, I'm still within the Design Studio. I'm going to click on Pages here. And what I do want to do now is add a brand new page. So I'm going to add a brand new web page. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this, user group meetups. I'm going to add this page to the main navigation, meaning we will be able to see it in the main navigation here. We have different layouts we can use. Usually I like to start from blank. And more advanced topic for developers. Developers can create custom layouts and they will appear here. Again, a little bit beyond what we're talking about this evening, but I'm going to pick my standard layout. I'm going to add that. And then we have this blank page. So here we see we have the ability to add components. So we have different things from text, buttons, images, videos, forms, multi-step forms, lists. We also hear the question earlier is how do we embed Power BI? This is a component where we can add the Power BI dashboard directly to a page. We also have the ability to add a spacer or an iframe. So some of these other tools that you might want to integrate into a page, you could potentially use iframes for to get that there. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this page a title. So I'm going to add just some text. I'm going to call this meetups. Oops. And let's change that from a paragraph. Let's make that a heading 1. So it appears a little bit bigger. We can do things like we can center this. We can even make this bold. So we've got this all set up here. Make that bold, like I said. There we go. And I'm going to change the padding a little bit. So let's just change this to, and change this like 3 pixels for the padding. So it's going to be a little bit more condensed. I'm going to change the background to one of my other colors. I'm going to go, I'm not a designer really. Let's make that yellow. So that's our first little bit. We're going to add a spacer in between here. And then we're going to add, I'll do an add a 1 column. So now that so you see how easy it is to add sections and add different layouts to your page here. Now the next thing we do is I'm going to add what we call a list. So this is where we're going to show a list of Dataverse data. So I'm going to click on this list, and here I can choose an existing list that I might have created earlier, or create a new one. This is going to use the Dataverse view kind of as a template or a layout, but in a sense, it's going to be stored as a different object in the database. So here I'm going to choose my tables, and I know I created session, but I created a meetup. I'm going to choose that. And then here's the Dataverse view. So I can actually select, first, let's just pick upcoming meetings. And then maybe I can also pick past meetings as well. Those are two different views that I selected. So I'm going to choose this. And then I'm just going to give my list a name. I'm just going to call this, meetups list. So that's what it's going to be stored as. If I look at the other settings, I have data here. We'll look at these eventually so I can do some of these actions. And then for settings, number of records per page, 10, that should be okay. And I'm going to turn on the search as well. So I've done that. It's added that list. And then what it's going to do, it's going to give me what it's going to look like. Now, the other thing that I need to do is I want to make sure that maybe we have a requirement that we only want people that have authenticated to the site are allowed to see these meetups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add what we call table permissions. So this is, getting into the security aspect of Power Pages. So I'm going to click on permissions. I already have one here. I'm going to take a look at that. And I've created this one. I've given it the name authenticated users only. If I didn't have that, I would be able to create it here. Here's my table, and I'm going to give this global access, meaning typically everybody that's linked to this with the right rights will have access to it. I'm only going to give them read access. And in terms of roles, I'm going to use the default authenticated user role. So we have different roles here. These are like security roles. By default, we have administrators, which more of a legacy thing. We have anonymous users, meaning users that just come to the site that don't log in, that don't authenticate. And then we have authenticated users. But if I wanted, I could go in and create my own custom web roles as well if I wanted to do specific things. And that's very typical in a Power Pages project where you create a series of web kind of security roles. For now, let's just leave it authenticated users. So what we're saying is authenticated users, once they authenticate, should be able to read this data. So we've set this up. I've hit save. So we have this authentication. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to preview. I'm going to log into my site. By clicking on this preview button, that does a couple things. That actually refreshes the cache of the Power Pages site, because sometimes it doesn't always, there's like a 15-minute cache cycle, so that doesn't bog down your portal. So just basically that means your data might be a little stale. This will actually refresh that. And so we see here my little spinner is spinning and I'm into the site, but notice I have this message: you don't have permission to view these records. That makes sense because I didn't log in, and remember we protected our data by saying that only authenticated users have access to this. So how are we going to be able to do this to make sure that we're able to see some data? So I can go in and hit sign in. Now, if I don't have a username, there's a couple different ways I can get it. We could use external authentication providers. This is a recommended way that we set up something like Azure B2C, or we tie it into LinkedIn, just to have that third or that external authentication provider. For today, we'll just use the regular forms-based one because it's easy, it works. Although Microsoft recommends we go to authenticated providers. A couple of different things I can do here. I can register. So if I'm just a random user and your organization allows random people to come in and sign up, no problem. They can go through that. And what that will do, that will create a corresponding contact record in your Dataverse, and then give them automatically, they'll be given that authenticated user web role or be a part of that. So they'll be able to access assets to which you've allowed the authenticated user role to have access to. We also have this redeem invitation. So if you're already using Dataverse or Dynamics 365, you don't necessarily want your customers to have to re-log in and create all these duplicates. So what we're going to do there is I'm going to go back into my design studio, and this is where I'm going to go into what we call the portal management app. So I'm going to go in here. And like I said before, this is a model-driven Power App where we use to manage the portal metadata. I'm just going to increase the size of this. And from here, if those of you who have seen model-driven apps, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. For those of you who are new, model-driven apps are very simple. They're really just lists and forms of data that's in your Dataverse. A little bit more to it than that, but that's really the gist of it. So I'm going to go here to security. I'm going to choose contacts. And then I already have a list of contacts that are already as part of the sample data, but you could have your own customers already in your system that you want to give access to your website with. So I'm going to go here to Maria Campbell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on create invitation. And what this will do as part of the command, it's going to create this invitation record. I'm going to hit save. And this is going to, under the advanced tab, give this invitation code. Now, you wouldn't have to do this for each individual contact. There's a way to do this in batches. And then also from an automation standpoint, there are some pre-built classic workflows that will allow you to go and send out these invites. Actually, there's also, if you're using Power Automate, there's some good blog posts out there on how to use Power Automate to send out these invitations to your end users as well. So they'll be able to get this code embedded in a hyperlink and use that to redeem the invitation. So for now, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go back to the site. Where are we? Here we go. And I'm going to paste in that invitation code. And again, we could embed this in a link and have that filled in automatically. I'm going to click on register. And what it's going to do is going to redeem that code. So I'm going to put in, I think that was Maria. I'm going to put that as her username. I'll put in a password. And again, this is why the external authentication providers are better, because they have all this built in, a little bit more secure. Although that password is still encrypted, but just again, using the authentication providers provides more security. And now you see what happens is it has pulled that information from Dataverse and is displaying that in a form directly on the portal. So this allows that user to not only be able to log in the portal, but they'll also be able to update their own profile information. So Maria can come in here and say, yep, this makes sense. Oops, nope, that's not my phone number. It's 1034. Maybe that's why they never got the calls through. She could update other information. And then when that's all done, just update that profile. But now we're going back to this meetups. Now remember, again, we have no records. There's no records to display, but remember we had multiple views. So here I want to change from upcoming meetups. I want to change to past meetups. And now we actually see all of those meetup data listed on a web page within our Power Pages site. So if we were to build this from scratch using something like .NET or JavaScript or something like that, this would have taken us probably days to get to this point where we're displaying Dataverse data that's in our Dataverse tables directly on a Power Pages site. This probably took me, about 10, 15 minutes to set this up. So this really goes to show the true power of Power Pages is the ability to actually surface that Dataverse data. So I'm going to just continue on a little bit there. So this is great. We can display data, but we can also get our end users to be able to update this data as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my design studio. And what I want to do is create a form where we're going to, let's just say we're going to allow our presenters to update their own information on the portal, but not anybody else's. So how we would do that? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another web page, but this time I'm going to create this as a child page. So I'm going to add a new sub page, and I'm going to call this edit edit meetup. And I'm not going to add this to the navigation because we're going to want to navigate to it from that list view, and I'll show you how in a minute. Again, I'm going to choose a blank. And again, new page. I can go in and add a title, but for sake of time, I'm just going to go dive right in and create the form. And here I'm going to choose a new form. And again, I could pick existing forms, but this is going to create a new asset that's different from the Dataverse form, but it's going to use that Dataverse form as I guess a template or a foundation. So again, I'm going to pick the table. We're going to choose meetups. And I'm going to choose the form that I created earlier. And I chose when I created web meetup Dataverse form. And here I'm going to name what I'm going to call that form component. And here I'm going to call this the meetup form, but I'm going to put -edit. And this is just a tip that I do because when we create these forms, there's something called different form modes, and a form can only be one mode. So how do we determine that? If I go to the data tab, we see here that we have options. We can create a record, we can update an existing record, or this can be a read-only form. And it can only be one of these things. I don't want to have my users create records in this instance. What I wanted them to do is be able to edit an existing record. So that's the form mode I'm going to create. What I would also do if I wanted to give them the ability to create records, I would create a brand new form. I might still use the Dataverse form as that template, but then I would actually use the create option on that particular form. So we're going to add a few more configurations here. So when we've submitted that form, I can display a message, but what I'm going to do is have that go back to my meetups page. I'm going to redirect that. CAPTCHA, I'm going to turn off CAPTCHA. This is good for security, but really annoying for demos. So I'm going to turn that off for now. We also have the ability, we could enable attachments. That's a little bit more of an advanced thing, but if you wanted to have something where people could upload some information or upload images, or I saw somebody the other day, a friend of mine was working on a site where they're doing a portal for an insurance company. So they're able to upload like pictures of cars or damages and that kind of thing. So we have those abilities there. So I've added that form. And now what I also want to do is I can change a few things here. I could go in and if I wanted to, I can change some of these things around a little bit. I can change the name, meetup, just call it a meetup. Do I want to show a description above the field, below the field? I can turn that on, or I could even set some simple validation. Here we could set a maximum character length, or if it's a phone number or a postal code or that type of thing, we could add those sort of criteria. I'm going to leave that there for now. And then the other thing I'm going to do here is, again, we want to add some permissions. So let's edit some permissions on this form. Remember that we wanted our speakers to be able to edit the form. So, or sorry, not edit the form, but edit the record. So how would we do that? Again, we would set up a table permission. And I'm going to, again, choose the table. And this time, instead of global access, I'm going to choose contact access. What this does is, remember when we created this table, we had a link to the contact, meaning it's going to use that link to that specific contact to kind of relay the security to provide that. So I've got that relationship here. So if you're new to Dataverse, Dataverse is a multi-relational table. So you could link tables and objects together. So we've done that. We have that contact linked that as a presenter, linked to our meetup. And then what I'm going to allow them to do is read, write, append, and append to, meaning they can attach these to their contact and other things. So we can read that, we can write that. I'm going to add the roles. Again, we have authenticated users. Again, I could have added a special role. Authenticated users will work. I'm going to save this permission. So we've got that set up now. So let's go back to our, oh, one more thing we need to do. how the heck do we get to this page? We didn't add it to our menu, but remember, we're also going to need to know what meetup we're editing. So how we'll do that is it's going to pass that a parameter, but what we'll do is we'll go into the user group meetings, which is our list, if you recall, and I'm going to go in and to edit that list. I'm going to go into that data section, and I can either choose view. So here we have the create record or delete record. I don't want to do these things. Let's just do edit record. I'm going to turn that on. And now I need to pick the target type, whether it's a form or a web page. We could have like a modal pop-up form, but here I'm going to choose a web page. And then I'm going to call this edit meetup. Now I created two earlier, so I hope I picked the right one. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to link on a record and link to that edit meetup page. Blech. So I've added that link now. So let's go and take a look and see how this all is going to work out. So I'm navigating back. I'm still logged in as Maria. I'm going to flip to my past meetups. Now it's interesting. Here's this first meetup. This is the presenter, Patrick. We have this drop down here for editing. I'm going to edit this. But what happens is, remember that Maria does not have access to sessions or things that aren't linked to her. So this will just simply appear as a read-only form. Can't make any edits. That's what we expect. So I'm going to go back to the user group meetups. I probably would pick this to be the default on a different view, but let's find one. So this is one that she is the presenter for. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to edit this. And remember, because we had that link, notice now she has the ability to update and edit this. Maybe we'll take out some of this. I know Scott's really good on his presentations here. He's a friend of mine, so hopefully he doesn't mind me messing this up a little bit. Maybe we'll change the date and time. Let's move this maybe a day later. And then we could just hit submit. And now what that's doing is, getting permissions error. Probably, I know why, because we have some more user permissions on the contact record. So this is a good thing. This is showing me that our security is incredibly robust in Power Pages. So what I'm going to quickly do, if I can very quickly do that, I'm going to go to my setup. I'm going to go into my table permissions. I'm going to go speaker edit. I'm going to add a child permission because the permissions can be stacked and linked. Because we want to be able to attach this to the contact table, I'm going to do this. We have that relationship. It's thinking about it. Spin, spin, spin. And I'm going to pick that relationship name. And then here I'm going to give the ability to append and append to. I don't need to add the role because it is a child permission. I'm going to hit save. So we have that. And now I'm going to go back into my pages and let's preview this again. And again, let's flip to the past meetups. Let's go to Maria. Let's go edit. And let's just remove some of this stuff. Hit submit. Bingo. And what this basically is supposed to go back here, but we see the data has automatically been edited back into Dataverse. So this is the cool thing. So very quickly within, it doesn't take me too long. I was able to set up a list. I was able to set up a form where we could actually view the data and also edit the data, but also set up security in such a way that we can control who has access to update that data, because I know that's always a big concern, especially with Power Pages projects, is how can we make sure our data is secure? So by default, as you can see, your data is secure from the get-go. You have to actually go through and fix that up. So I see there's a question there about some styling. Can make the second column word wrap. Yeah, we could. There's a lot of things we can do with this. I do want to talk a little bit about the styling. of how we can make that happen, there is the styling workspace. And we see here we had these brand colors. We have a whole different bunch of themes here. So if we wanted, we could swap out to different themes. And what that will do is that will automatically apply. So here's a green theme. If I wanted, I could begin to make a few different edits here. Maybe I want to change that to be a little bit of a more darker kind of color. I can flip that. And that sort of changes, again, my look and feel. I could change some other things. Let's change the heading 1. Let's change the font on that. Let's make this a little bit like a, bit of a ransom note. We can change some of the different headings and styling, some of the site navigation. We can change some of that all the way down to buttons and links, different sections, margins, and spacing. So I can go in through this styling workspace and begin to modify that. Now, if I wanted to go a little bit deeper and change some stuff, I'm just going to hit save on this. And what this is doing, it's saving that particular theme. I can go in, and here I also have the ability to, whatever theme I picked here, I can go in and manage the CSS. So if you're a CSS person, what you can do is you can upload your own custom CSS files from here. Now, I don't actually have one available. And so you can upload your own CSS files. And then once it's uploaded here, you'll have the ability to open this up in VS Code and make further edits. Now, this is the thing that was always a bummer for me to tell people is currently today, this uses Bootstrap version 3. So if you're a designer who's working with websites, you probably are going to wait a minute. Bootstrap 3 is like 5,000 years old. It's an older technology. Absolutely. So what is actually now been announced is Power Pages will be moving to Bootstrap 5. That means that there'll be a point very soon where anytime you spin up a new site, it's going to be using Bootstrap 5. If you have existing sites, there's going to be tooling to allow you to help you move that from Bootstrap 3 to Bootstrap 5 to use those more modern frameworks when you're doing things and you're styling, and you can go the more advanced styling and modify the look and feel of these tables and these pages and that type of thing. So that's the styling standpoint. I know it probably it's getting a little bit late. I know a few people have to drop off already. That's understandable. I do want to point out a couple other things. First off, we talked earlier about another section here, just one column. There was the ability about adding Power BI. So unfortunately, I don't have Power BI enabled on this particular environment. But in order to do this, what you first need to do is you need to go in and enable Power BI on the site. This can be done through the admin center, which is through here. You go in, you enable. This is sort of more the administrator sandbox, you could say, where they can go in and configure sites. You first need to turn that on. And then once you turn that on, then you're going to be able to embed your Power BI dashboards and reports. The other thing you'll be able to do is integrate that. So here, if I turn this on, Power BI visualization or the Power BI embedded service, you have both abilities here. This is probably going to take you a lot longer. It's going to look for a few different things, but effectively you turn that on. Once that's turned on, then you're going to be able to go into your site here and then enable that, and then also be able to link into there's methods, and we do have a document that we are going to publish hopefully in the next week or so that really gives good details on how you can configure this for your Power Pages site to link it into the currently logged in user, to link to the row level security so they only see the information that's relevant to them based on that Power BI report. Yeah, there's a lot of things we can do with Power Pages. I just scratched the surface. Once our site's ready, we can go through a go live checklist. We could enable other identity providers, enable things like content delivery networks, web application firewalls, custom domain, and then also kind of set that site to public, meaning moving it from a private site into a public site once you're ready. Now, typically what you'd want to do is create this on a different dev environment and where you use the Power Platform CLI to move that whole portal from one site to another. So Power Pages ALM, that's a whole other big topic. There's a lot of movement happening there. You're going to see a lot of information coming, a lot of new tooling to make that possible to have a good ALM process. So I've chatted a lot. Hopefully I've been able to answer your questions as much as I could going through this. I just want to cover off a few things before we finish up is some other features, things I just didn't have time to show you. If it's in Power Apps portals, it's in Power Pages. Custom web templates, layouts, use liquid markup. You can, if you're a developer, there's got a web API. You can do a lot of amazing things. Like I said, you can display SharePoint, Power BI, Power Virtual Agents. Power Virtual Agents can't really do that through the adding component, but we've recently published an article on how to do that a little bit through the back end. It's a little bit different, but you can definitely do it. You can do things like calendar, map views. You can launch workflows as you maybe saw in the release plans. We'll be able to launch Power Automate flows and have that information come back to the portals, which is really cool. And you can extend your existing Power Platform and Dynamics projects. So what I'd like for all of you to do is when you get a chance, create a Power Pages trial, build a site. There's a great community here that's available, and check out Microsoft, the Power Pages documentation. That's what I work on. If you find any errors or anything that's missing, there's a place to add comments at the end. We're a little bit of a backlog right now, but we are working through those to make the documentation the best it can be. So I've talked a lot. Any questions? Any more questions from everybody? I think I've got most of them in the chat, but if there's anything else, more than happy to answer them.
Kenneth had asked, can you make the second column word wrap?
Yeah, I probably could. It'd probably take me a while to kind of configure that. There are ways through the list view itself. But what I do sometimes, if I have a session like this more for the developer side of it, where I actually use something called Liquid and I build a custom web template where you can begin to really format and lay out your data exactly how you want it. If you don't like that kind of grid, very system grid view, and you want to display information differently, Liquid, and there's using Liquid, you could really go in and really format the data how you want it to show up.
Awesome. We also had another question from Hannah. Can Power Pages be embedded in a SharePoint site?
Embedded within a SharePoint site, probably not elegantly, but you can embed Power Pages in other sites. But of course, I'm not sure how well the responsiveness and the styling would work, but it might just depend on what your use case is around that. We do have a topic on how to embed Power Pages site, but in my experiences, it's never looked that pretty. It's always been a bit clunky, but sometimes functional.
Let's see here. So would this be the best way to invite a partner to view some Power BI dashboards we have created in a secure environment?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
that's definitely, and again, hopefully we'll have a bit better guidance around that. But that's definitely a great use case for using Power Pages.
Well, I
Yeah.
do see one more question from Naveen. Any guidance on configuring Azure B2C authentication?
Yeah, we do have actually some documentation on that. There was a wizard that I don't know if it's actually been re-enabled or not, but we do have our documentation. We are in the process now of converting all our Power Apps portals documentation into Power Pages, but we do have some instructions there for the Azure B2C. If you get stuck or anything like that, definitely leave a comment on that particular topic, so we can make sure that gets smoothed out. The tricky part is the Azure B2C people don't always tell us when they might have changed something. So we have to kind of keep on top of that. But yeah, there is some information there. And I do think the Fast Track team might have published a blog today even. So check out the communities, the Microsoft community sites for some of this information. There's a good article on setting up like authentication providers and things like that.